Hello and welcome to the Money Marketing Podcast. I'm Kimberley Dondo, and in today's episode we are back again, and by we I mean me and Lois.
Chief Reporter.
Chief Reporter, you didn't give yourself a
Chief
fun
Executive,
title.
sorry.
Okay, well, it's going to happen every time. I thought you were going to come up with something more creative this time around.
Sorry, I didn't have time. Too busy with my Chief Executive role.
There's been a lot going on, so I guess first, I thought we should probably discuss a bit more about the consumer duty, since we are
at the anniversary of the implementation deadline.
Yeah. So now we've made it. Last year, everyone was like, oh God, how are we going to implement it? For those that hadn't, and for those that already had, they were like, why weren't you already doing this? Why is this so shocking? But what have your findings been in the lead up to, the anniversary? I'm sure you're working on a lot covering it.
Yeah. So I actually had a chat recently with a financial advisor who only launched his business less than a year ago. I think it was September last year.
Mm-hmm.
So he was saying, obviously, when he went directly authorised instead of appointed representative, so he's not under a network.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying in the forms that he had to fill out when he was launching his advice business, they were asking questions about the consumer duty. So he'd sort of already set his business up with consumer duty in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I suppose if you're a financial advisor who's owned your own business for years
20,
already,
30 years.
Exactly, then it's probably been more of a hassle.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I always generalise, obviously, because you have to. It is a generalisation, but
yeah.
I think the majority of them probably are finding all the extra questions they have to answer to the FCA and all the extra forms they have to fill out. They're probably finding it a bit of a burden.
Yeah.
Especially if they don't have any compliance function within their business. So this advisor I was talking to yesterday, he's called Benjamin Mitchell. He's the only advisor in his advice business.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way he wanted it. And as I say, he's only been up and running for a few months. But
Mm-hmm.
he was saying he can imagine, if you've been a one-man band advisor for advice firm for decades, it's probably been quite a sort of burden for you.
I couldn't imagine setting something up years ago and running a system one way. I mean, we talked about this a little bit last time, where it was like, if you came into journalism 20 years ago versus now having to incorporate, all aspects of media, where including social media into that might be a bit of a burden for you. That's how the analogy that I thought of. But I think once you pick something up, it does become second nature and you start doing automatically. So maybe initially there's growing pains, but potentially maybe not this year, but maybe next year we'll have more positive outcomes potentially.
Yeah, I would have thought so, because we've had a lot of press releases, as you can imagine, all about the consumer duty 1 year on and what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
I think I saw a press release headline the other day saying most customers haven't noticed a difference since the consumer duty came in.
Which is is that good, or
I don't know, maybe that is good,
or
but
has the level always been so high that so customers are like, no, this is standard?
Exactly. I didn't actually read the press release in depth, I must admit, but I imagine it's partly because it's not just, I said this last podcast when we were having our conversation, it's obviously not just advisors that this applies to.
Mm-hmm.
It's also retail banks, for example, and I know a lot of them had already improved their whole customer service process.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly personally have noticed it, with my own, I used to be with Nationwide. They massively improved their app and everything, their whole process.
Had a rebrand.
So then I think if you wouldn't, as a customer, you wouldn't necessarily notice a huge amount of difference.
Yeah.
It's probably just more about Nationwide, for example, evidencing, as I said last time,
Mm-hmm.
all about evidencing rather than changing what you're actually doing.
Yeah. And also I think I was having a conversation with Dr. Louis Williams from Dynamic Planner, and we were talking about the implications of consumer duty when it comes to vulnerable clients. And then we're talking about first of all, what is a vulnerable client? Because I think a lot of people just think elderly people who might be at risk of
Yeah.
scams and all of that stuff. But he was also like pointing out that, you know, there's people with different disabilities that can also be placed under that. And when you come to, it's not just visible disabilities as well, it's like mental ones where
Like
you narcolepsy, ADHD. So we run the gambit over here. But I think I was saying, you know, like as someone who has difficulty paying attention for a long time, or I always need to juggle different things. I do like it that a lot of financial services products now have like very short, succinct things that I can consume. I think that is very useful. So in those terms, I wonder if advisors are also thinking of that as well.
Yes, that is a point I was going to make.
Yeah.
We're so in sync.
We are.
So another thing Benjamin said when I was talking to him recently was it's been a real opportunity for advisors to make their, I suppose, the way they communicate with clients a lot more interesting and engaging, through not just sending out, you know, really long newsletters, but also just really long letters all in regulatory language through the post. Like that is such an old school thing to do. And a lot of clients now, again, generalization, but a lot of clients are much more environmentally aware, for example. So they might not want a massive stack of paper every time they switch an investment or whatever they want to do. But also it's just really boring. Like I think I've used this example before when I was switching pensions into PensionBee. I switched 4 pensions, 3 of them just did it all fine, like PDF signature. I mean, it was a little bit slow, but much faster than the 4th one.
Yeah.
Virgin Money, which I have. This was 3 years ago, to be fair. I'm sure they've updated their processes since, and I'm pretty sure they've tied up with, I'm not going to say who because I can't remember. But they asked me, they sent out a massive stack of paper, all in regulatory language, and I got back to them and said, I'm not going to read through all this. Like, can you just send me sort of a little bit about what I should be paying aware of? And they got back and said, no, we have to send that all out because that's what the FCA says, which is just not true because the other 3 pension providers didn't do that.
Yeah.
They said that in order to transfer, I had to send them a copy of my driver's license or passport. And I was like, well, obviously I'm not going to send the actual driver's license. So I had to send a photocopy, I had to take it to the post office and get it stamped. So the post office is like 20 minutes walk away. And they said we need a utility bill or something that's been sent to your address. They really
didn't want you to do this.
I was like, is this actually what you have to do, or is this just blocking me?
Sometimes it does end up feeling that way, like they're trying to make you just give up, because every process that you talked about with someone like me, I would put it off.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm giving up. It's just that I'm like, I'll get to it. And then it will get to a point where it just never gets done.
It did take
and I'm
a lot
sure
longer.
They probably have a lot of customers who might have ended up that way.
Yeah, and then also if a advisor has, say, I don't know, 100, 150 clients, and they're having to do that sort of process for every single client.
That's so...
Obviously, they're not going to be able to give up because their customer...
It's their job.
Their client's going to need it done, but it's just going to take so much.
Yeah, it's time consuming. When they I
can't remember
have other
how we
even
got onto that, but yeah, it's
all encompassing in the consumer duty. I guess.
Consumer duty. How advisors interact with clients. It's just as I said, it's an opportunity to make the way that you interact with clients more interesting. Like you can do videos. I think Benjamin does videos, like just short sort of snippets of information.
Yeah. Is there anything else that's coming up when it comes to consumer duty, or are we just like on a steady path now?
I think probably steady path from now on.
Okay. Well,
I hope so.
I hope so too. But we do have a new government in place since we last talked. We pretty much predicted it. We were right. I don't think it was really shocking for anyone though.
No.
But what has the fallout, I guess, or I don't know what a positive way of saying fallout is. But
Positive fallout.
yeah, what is the positive fallout of that? I know that most people, when I talk to them, they said, it doesn't really matter when, there's a new government coming in place, because most of the time, whatever their policies are, they won't take effect for a while. But I did see that Rachel Reeves announced a pensions review. So
she hasn't, well, from what I've seen, she hasn't said a huge amount about it. So I suppose we're still just speculating about what might be in there. We wrote a cover feature before Labour got in. I kind of did write it. I mean, it was neutral, because when we were writing it, we didn't know who was going to be in power. When it was published, we were going to find out 2 days after it was published or something.
Yeah.
So it had to be written in a sort of just the next government kind of way. But I did kind of write it with the fact that Labour was probably going to be in power in my head. And I wrote a bit about the pensions review and what might be included in that, including looking at auto-enrolment, which came in 2012, I think, and has widely been regarded as a success, because obviously more people are now saving into a pension via their workplace.
Yeah.
However,
unless they opt out, like that Reddit story I was telling you about, but
yeah,
that's for a future weekend essay.
keep that under wraps. But yeah, unless they opt out, like you say, does that prevent a lot of people from engaging with their pension? And are they just thinking, oh, well, my workplace is just sorting that out, I don't even need to think about it, when actually they're probably not saving enough into their pension to fund their retirement? Because I think the contribution is 8%.
Yeah.
Minimum. It goes anyway. I think it's just you go in at 8%.
Yeah.
And that's not enough for most people.
And
who are on like an average
I think
salary.
for the everyday person, they think that's it. That's fine.
Yeah.
Because
why else would they have said it like
why
that?
would they? Unless you're a pensions expert or work within pensions, or or you're a financial services journalist, I guess, you won't know these things. And I didn't know these things until I was 25 and working for, the first magazine I ever worked for, which was Pensions Insight. And from there, like, I would talk to the other journalists, and one of them would tell me I'm maxing out my pension. And I was like, what's that?
I don't know if I could afford to do that. That's pretty impressive.
She was like, she was very determined, because she wrote about pensions all day. She was very passionate about it. And it made me look at my pension and be like, okay, what more can I be doing? I am still a pessimist when it comes to stuff like that. But
it's good to have a contingency.
It's good to have a contingency plan. I always have a contingency plan, even when, I'm going about my daily life. So why not have one for my pension as well? But I know for a fact that my friends who aren't aware of any of this, if I wasn't telling them, they would have no idea.
Yeah.
If I didn't tell my parents, they wouldn't have any idea.
See, mine's the other way around.
Well,
because I've always been
aware,
because my dad's always been like, you must pay in more than they just put you on. Just every time you get a pay rise, put it up.
Yeah.
So I've always done that.
But then you're like, oh, but Dad, I want to go on holiday.
Yeah. Just get into loads of debt instead. We'll come on to that later.
Put a pin in that.
I'm going to go on about it again.
Yeah, but I think that Labour does have a lot stacked up against them, it seems.
Well, also one, and I can't remember who said it, so I apologise. I'm not going to tell everyone that you said it, but I read, obviously, because everyone... So it was such a weird election because most people were not voting because they really wanted Labour to be in power. I know some people were. Lots of people, either former Tories or just others, were wanting Labour in power because they weren't the Tories. It was basically like an election of let's get the Tories out, and it doesn't really matter who comes in their place. We just want someone else. And so that does put quite a lot of pressure on Labour now to make the changes quite quickly, because otherwise... people are going to sort of lose this momentum of change and get sort of they're going to start criticising Labour for not making changes.
But I think
quick
a
enough.
logical person has to understand that 12 years
Yeah,
of damage
I think it's 12, yeah.
is a lot to undo in potentially 4 years.
But what percentage of the British public would you say is
Well-
logical people? Also, remember, a person can be intelligent, but people are stupid.
Yeah, I know. The thing is, I think also sometimes we have this idea, and I feel like we're slowly breaking that down, like outside of financial services, the whole age of like celebrity and looking up to these people who hold certain positions and thinking that because they are in those positions, they have a certain level of intelligence or elegance or whatever. Like they are above us and can make better decisions than us. I think we're slowly breaking that down and starting to see that person's just like me.
Mm-hmm.
They just went to a better school does not necessarily mean that they are any better than I am. And if I make mistakes, then they have the potential of making those mistakes as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Doesn't
It's-
mean that I should have empathy for them, but
It's weird because I know social media's like often criticised for showing just the best parts of someone's life or like the really filtered parts and making people feel like they have to live up to an ideal. I do also think probably the amount of social media posts there are nowadays, like the number of social media posts there are nowadays, probably helps people to see
the
that
reality.
celebrities are just normal
Yeah.
people as well.
I think also because there's so much like exposing that's happening as well amongst public figures that even things done in the dark come to light. And bringing it back to Labour. So yesterday, I don't know when this is going to come out, but yesterday the Chancellor did talk about the £20 billion black hole of public finances.
Yeah.
Which again was very scary, but I like that they're being so transparent because I think maybe that's what was lacking before, and I think that's what makes most people anxious and angry is the lack of transparency. Because again, we always talk about communication being important, even with advisors and their clients. So, but also it's just really scary to think about what the upcoming budget will be based on
I know.
that.
And hasn't she sort of said they're going to leave taxes for like regular people alone?
Yeah,
Implying
capital gains tax.
They are going to tax the rich
Yeah, so I
more heavily.
think she suggested, well, people are saying potentially she'll look at capital gains tax and inheritance tax, which will apply to our audience,
Yeah.
the financial advisors. They'll have to look out for that because there's a lot of people probably hoping to pass something on to their kids, and now they'll have to figure out ways to make it more beneficial for them.
And we know is it budget now, not statement?
It's a
never know.
budget,
I can never
and
see which way
it's
around
budget
it is.
in October,
Budget is going to be 30th of October.
which I said was spooky.
And how many press releases are we going to get relating it to Halloween?
Okay, I'm doing a pitch for Budget Day this year. We come
Best
in,
Halloween pun.
yeah, we come in dressed in Halloween costumes to make it festive.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Let's
Okay.
do it.
Let's run it by Tom and see what he says.
No, I don't think we need to do that. Let's just do
We
it.
should just do it. Yeah, let's just do it. Moving on, I guess let's talk about emerging trends. So, have there been any big trends or anything new that you've noticed when you've been out and about?
This whole thing about integration between different technologies, like back office providers and platforms and other technology that advisors have to use to run their businesses, it's not new, but it's definitely gaining traction. There seem to be quite a few little startup businesses that are sort of coming up and trying to help now. So I spoke to one, again, I don't know when this is going to come out, but recently,
Yeah.
this morning, this morning when we're recording,
Yeah.
which I won't mention because I haven't written about them yet. But then there was also, I went to an event held by the Langcat called the Catwalk.
Mm-hmm.
When was that? Must have been about a month ago.
Yeah, May?
Was it May? No.
June. Sorry, early June. Sorry, yeah.
June, yeah. And so they were showcasing 5 different tech providers, and the winner was Zero Key, which is a business that started up to make integrations between platforms and different tech providers more seamless. And it's an interesting business because they don't need the provider's permission to do that. They can just do it. Obviously, they're going to go and talk to the providers first.
Yeah.
But they can actually just do it whether they've got a API or not. Because like one of the issues is, even if a big back office provider says that they can integrate with different platforms, often that's only one way. So yes, they can integrate with that platform, but the platform might not be able to integrate back, whereas true integration is obviously two-way. And that's one of the things that this business Zero Key is trying to correct, I suppose. So that's one area, integration gaining traction. I don't think there have been any massive developments with AI since we last
Who knows?
spoke.
I mean, I've looked into, not necessarily within financial services, but I find it really interesting, the whole concept of the fact that right now, I don't know if you've come across it, but I've seen so many messages. I don't know why they're targeting me, but they keep asking, do you want to train AI? And essentially,
yeah, you were saying
I find it so
like-
bizarre that they are recruiting human beings to train these AI to a point where then the human beings who have been training them are no longer needed.
Yeah, that's a bit like saying, we want you to train this person so that
to
they can
take over your
job.
job. And it's like, it's
Which
so
is fine if you're a
dystopian.
tyrant, but yeah.
And I understand it, because if you want to make money now, and it's like gig work essentially, you know, it's money that you can make on the side, and that's how they're pitching it. And I'm not gonna lie, the rates that they're giving out there are really great. And from what I've gathered, they target people from specific fields. So if you have a science background, they'll ask you to train it on that aspect.
Okay.
If you have a mathematical background, you'll be training it on like answering formulas and all that stuff.
If they want it trained on grammar, I'm happy to.
I'm sure there are like writing
Take a
and
side
creativity, because remember a year ago or so, we put in a prompt into ChatGPT asking it to create a screenplay for
Oh yeah.
me and Piers's buddy cops.
That
It
was
was
hilarious.
and it was pretty good, but I'm sure there's still writers out there training AI to be more creative.
Yeah, and not just to rip off other people's work.
Yeah, but there's going to be a point where it gets so good that maybe, you know, Disney will be like, oh, we don't need writers anymore, which is...
I can't remember if I mentioned it in our last podcast, but in our company, obviously, we've been doing some AI experiments with ChatGPT 4.0, is it? The latest one. And I tried to get it to write an opinion piece in my voice, but it got very confused. And so I only put in one sample of my writing, and it was my weekend essay about the end of the world.
Yeah.
Which, yes, it has a lot of relevance to financial services, so I don't want to hear anything different. But I put that in, and I said, can you write me a opinion piece about whether Donald Trump is a good leader in the style of this excerpt above?
Yeah.
And it just got... So first of all, I put the excerpt in, and I didn't give it a prompt, and it just started psychoanalyzing me. And telling me that I like writing about the end of the world because it gets me away from my own mundane life.
Oh, well.
I was like, well, thanks.
True.
Probably true. And then I said the Donald Trump question, and it just started talking about what kind of leader Donald Trump would be at the end of the world. So I didn't quite get it. But I do know, my sister was telling me there's journalists who have got their own... They've sort of taken, I can't remember which large language model, but they've taken one and trained it by putting a lot of samples of their own work in and trained it to write in their voice.
Is that good for the journalist, though?
Well, it's good for them at the moment. It might be in the future when people realise, oh, we probably don't need the journalists then.
You hardly do any work now. You just
put that in.
Type stuff
Write
in.
about this in my voice.
And they're like, whoa.
I won't tell you which
it's
journalist
efficient.
it is.
Work smarter, not harder. But I don't know. I did have another thought about AI, but I can't think of what it is right now. What was it? Oh, I don't know. But I think maybe we should move on to our final segment, because
Oh
we've been
no.
here for a little bit.
I know
So
what
this
it's
is
gonna
where we
be.
are a little bit silly and goofy, and but I think it's still practical. So I thought we could talk a little bit about our financial mishaps, and the only one that stood out to me was, I was saying this briefly to you before, but during university, I never got like the credit card or anything like that, and I never got, but I did get the overdraft, but I never needed to use it at the time. I was
Mm.
quite good. But then once I graduated, I had a year of unemployment, which I will forever hate. What's her name? The first lady PM.
Margaret Thatcher?
No, the
First
second
lady.
lady PM. Sorry, I forgot
Liz
about
Truss?
Margaret. No, the one in the
Oh,
middle.
Theresa May, sorry.
Theresa May.
I forgot
I
about
hate
her.
Theresa May. Well, because I was in the process of getting my British passport, but at the time the Home Office was an absolute wreck, and I remember constantly reading about backlogs,
Mm.
and so I was one, and it hurt especially because like I remember my parents, my mom, my dad, and my sister all got theirs,
Ugh.
and it felt like I was being actually targeted because I was the only one who wasn't able to work because I graduated
Mm.
in this weird transition phase where I'm like getting my passport, and I would go to interviews and be like, I can work, but they'd be like, we don't want to risk it,
Oh, that's so
which is like
annoying.
fair, but I had a whole year of not working, so to live and be able to do stuff, I ended up using my overdraft, which I do regret now.
But how else could you have done it?
Honestly, I probably shouldn't have made as many Sainsbury's trips, but I was just trying to. I was trying
Shouldn't
to.
have bought food.
I was really into cooking at the time, so I would just like that was my hobby. So I would just go to my local Sainsbury's for ingredients, and that's genuinely where most of my money went that year. And obviously, maybe I should have relied more on my parents, but it's just very hard when you're 21 and you're trying to solidify yourself as an adult. But
It wasn't hard for me. I still rely on my parents.
yeah, I know now I have no problem being like dad or mom. You brought me into this world against my will. But
You may have already spent £500,000 on me, but may I have some more?
I didn't choose this. I didn't. I didn't choose this. But yeah, that's probably my biggest mishap. And I did find myself, when I was getting into work, regretting that because I was like, oh, now I have to pay off, debt that wouldn't have had if I'd just, or if I'd been able to find, like online work, like that AI training thing that I'm talking about. That would have been amazing if that was an option for me back then. But yeah, it's something that you live and you learn from. And now I really don't like going into too much of my overdraft or relying too much on my credit card, and I try to be better, but obviously things happen. But I think that's one financial misstep.
That sounds fair.
Yeah.
And like you learn from your mistakes, but I don't. The number of times I've gone into the supermarket for one or two things and come out with £100 worth of shopping is ridiculous.
£100?
Yeah.
But you're vegetarian, so it's more
Yeah.
expensive.
Vegan now.
Vegan, even more expensive because you're buying new
And I'm
vegetables.
vegan, so I like everyone to know that I'm vegan, so I always say I'm vegan.
I do
'Cause I'm
vegan.
vegan.
I do vegan twice a year, and it's the most expensive time for me as well because I'm just constantly getting vegetables because they go off so quickly.
Yeah, that's true. I can't think of a standout one. I mean, as listeners who've read my weekend essays will know, I am in quite a lot of debt.
A lot of people are offering to help you.
And it is not because, but I don't know if I want to take that help. It's not for one reason. And it's not because
It's just life.
It's not because I buy loads of stuff, generally.
Yeah.
I did go through a phase through lockdown of buying loads of stuff I didn't need. I don't do that anymore. I don't think I overbuy food.
No.
Maybe I do. I do go out for dinner a lot. That's probably one. But it's fun.
Yeah. I think for me, it's interesting how different people perceive debt.
Yeah,
Because
I
I
don't
think-
mind it. It's just like I'll just spend the bank's money.
But I think because of the way I was raised, I have like this inherent fear of like having too much debt. Like it's bad.
Oh yeah, no,
But
I
at the same time, it's like,
should have.
look at your credit score because you're able to balance that debt because they need to see that you're able to do that and pay your.
My credit score is really good.
Yeah,
It's
same.
like 998.
So, and that's because of like managing my debt. And it's just so confusing because at the same time, your parents are like, don't get a credit card, never get into
My
debt.
dad's the king of budgeting. He
Yeah.
budgets every pound, so I should be like that. But
I'm getting better as I get older, but I think, again, it's one of those things where you live and you learn, or you get a financial advisor, but I'm not quite there yet.
I'll just get into more debt
financially.
if I get a financial advisor.
I mean, I don't know.
Probably
My
shouldn't say that to our
My
audience.
Greg's shares are looking pretty good, so maybe I need to be calling a financial advisor soon to be like, handle my portfolio of this one share I have in Greg's.
Brilliant.
But I don't know if there's any other mishaps that we can talk about.
Not a mishap, but I really want to go on a big trip across Korea and Japan, or some kind of big trip that's like a month out. Don't tell Tom or Piers.
Sabbatical. You
Yeah.
can work. Oh no, it's
No, I
like
don't want
6
to work.
hours.
I just want to take it off.
Okay.
And instead of doing that, I just keep doing like holidays to hot
Europe.
places in Europe
Mm.
and spending
Yeah.
my money there, which is really nice. I enjoy it. I've done it like last year. I said I'm not going to go abroad this year because I need to save money so that I can go. Like
But you
another
needed
trip
a
I want to do
break.
is Africa, specifically Botswana horseback safari.
Mm-hmm.
However, I went to Paris, Mykonos, and Sicily.
Because they're just there and they're
just
cheaper.
there and they're easy to get to.
Yeah.
It's not a very long flight.
Yeah.
They're sunny.
I think that's the thing is that sometimes you're like, oh, I really need a break though. And I think you do. Like everyone deserves a break and it's really hard. It's that delayed gratification thing. I think that
I'm not very good at that.
encompasses everything. It's really hard to look forward to something that you can't quite imagine. But I'm trying to save to go back to Zimbabwe around Christmas time, which will be expensive because that time of year is summer.
But that's like not too far in the future to be.
Yeah. But I've
Something
been
you'd be
saving for
excited
this
to do.
since like lockdown stopped.
Oh, okay.
So now my mom's like, no, I'm actually going now. So if you want to come along, which is helpful for me because then I'll have like someone to take me around places to see.
Accountability. Oh, right. I thought
No.
you meant accountability to save.
No, well, yeah, that too, but also just it just makes traveling easier because I'm not very comfortable speaking in my language, which is terrible. But I only need like
Neither
a
am I in
couple of
mine,
days.
so it's fine.
English?
I'm actually really good at English.
Yeah. I'm really good at English, but not so good at Shona. But that's just because I'm not speaking it every day. So I think a couple days there,
Yeah, you'll
I'll
pick
be
it up.
fine. But also just it'll block me from having to see all my relatives because I want to actually treat this as a holiday. But it is hard to save for something like that when you're like, oh, I could just go to Turkey for half the price. But then end up actually spending just as much as I
Yeah.
would have because
I know, because I've been like, oh, I could just go for a week in Devon. And then I look at the prices of Airbnbs there and I'm like, oh, actually, I could go to Greece.
Yeah, no.
For like £100
doing a
more.
staycation in this country, I'm sorry. I might as well go abroad because it's just ridiculous. But I think that's everything. Was there anything else you wanted to cover?
Don't think so.
Yeah.
I think we're all good.
Well, thank you for joining us in this episode. I had a great time and
So did I.
I hope maybe next time we can maybe include one of the other
No,
editorial.
this is
This is our thing.
exclusive club. No, of
Okay.
course they can be involved.
Maybe we can just one at a time include them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can bring them in
And
as
then we can
guests.
grill them.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah. Thank you for joining us and follow us on all social media and follow us on moneymarketing.com as well.